Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange, MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, and a warm welcome to the Elevate Business podcast. Both myself, Ange MacCabe, and Scott Russ are your hosts. We have the pleasure of introducing you to Michelle Hurlburt, who is the founder of 3D Life, Inc. Michelle's work is based on inspiring and supporting adults through the sometimes uncomfortable process of whole human skills development so that they can lead fuller, richer lives and positively impact the world around them. With 20 years experience in education, she is deeply passionate about emotional intelligence and social emotional learning skills, mental health, leadership, and creating safe and supportive workplaces. Hi, Michelle. Welcome to the Elevate Business podcast. So glad you're here.
Hi, Ange, and hi, Scott. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here today.
Yeah. So can you tell us and our subscribers a little bit about yourself, your journey, and your current role as CEO at 3D Life, Inc.?
Sure. I'm an educator by trade. I've been in the education system and space for about 20 years, having traveled and lived overseas. I worked in Asia for 8 years and moved back to Nova Scotia in 2004 and really didn't get really back into the education system until 2006. But once there, realized that there were some other things that I wanted to focus on in my career that I thought were really important in the education world. One of them was really focusing on the skills of friendship and helping students feel more comfortable learning about themselves and finding their way, like navigating through the social space of particularly being a teenager, as I was in middle school at the time. And there was a lot of focus on the academic side, as there is in education. And I really struggled with that myself personally, mainly because I knew how important and how influential these other parts of these kids' lives were impacting them. So, standing in front of a classroom and trying to teach outcomes, curriculum outcomes, and help these students get good grades, I knew that there was a missing link. It wasn't all about the academics. While important, I acknowledge that.
Of course.
When we want students to learn and really human beings in general, when we want people to learn things, they need to be available to learn, and they need to have the energy, they need to have the brain space, I like to say, to be able to take in what we're asking them to learn. And when there are external factors and things that are going on in either their world outside of their work or in school, in this particular case, then that can play a lot on their emotions. It can play a lot on whether they're available or not to learn to the best of their ability. So I kind of became a broken record in talking to my colleagues and my administrators, and just around the fact that we need to be teaching them more. We need to be doing more, helping them with relationships, helping them understand who they are and what they want, and being able to set some boundaries. And so I changed roles a lot within the education system because I was looking for that right fit. I was looking for that right spot.
Yeah.
And I finally got to a point where I had the opportunity to be a behavior intervention resource teacher, where I have a soft spot for students who have a hard time keeping themselves together, that who struggle with emotions, who struggle with the structure of being in school, and the relationships that they have with some adults versus the relationships they have with others. And so I thought, woohoo, I've arrived. I've made it. This is my jam. And I loved it. I loved the people that I was working with, and it was really valuable to me personally, as well as to the school community. Then the opportunity came up for me to apply for a social and emotional learning coach position in our school district. And that, I thought, well, here's an opportunity for me to spread the message, because when I first started, I really didn't have the language of social emotional learning skills. I didn't know that terminology, or emotional intelligence. I didn't have those terms.
And sorry, just to pause you for a second, Michelle, for our subscribers, tell us a little bit, kind of Cole's notes, as to what is exactly social emotional learning? Because we've heard that buzzword around EIQ or emotional intelligence, but not so much social emotional learning.
Yeah, so social and emotional learning is really about 5 core competencies. So emotional intelligence has core competencies, and actually social and emotional learning really stemmed from the studies and the research done around emotional intelligence. So social and emotional learning has 5 core competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management, and responsible decision making.
Right.
And so within these core competencies are really looking at the whole person, really looking at helping them not only, in the case of students, learning how to be better learners, but also learning how to feel and do and be better themselves, so they can get along well with others, they can problem solve, they can develop their own leadership skills, and make informed decisions based on the information that they're able to acquire and learn for themselves. So
I really wish, and I think Scott can jump in here too, I wish that we had that in our school system when we were growing up. Like, I can reflect back to when I was like 12, 15, 16, 18, where there's been so many situations where I'm like, I could have handled it a little bit better, or I felt super overwhelmed in that, or how do I sort through my emotions? How am I showing up for myself or advocating for self in this situation with my social peers, or even in the school system? So I think it's quite amazing that you had that opportunity in the school system to jump into the SEL coach position.
Yeah. And it was great. And you're right. We weren't taught this as we were growing up. We weren't, we suppressed emotions. We held them in. We had to look strong and be strong. And, particularly around uncomfortable emotions, if we were angry, or if we were upset, if we were sad, how often have we been told, oh, stop crying, and
suck it up.
Suck it up. Yeah. You'll get over it. This isn't a big deal.
Exactly.
So it was really interesting to be able to do this work from an adult perspective, going into elementary schools, particularly as an adult who hadn't had these things taught either. So there was a lot of learning that I did personally, but also, and professionally, of course. What I came to find was that while it was valuable, while people recognized the value in it and wanting to do it, knowing that these are skills that students are going to be more successful overall in their life outcomes and in their academics and social relationship.
Right. Yeah.
It was, I kind of became a broken record again, because as an adult who didn't have the skills even like up to 10 years ago, I worked on my own skills and my own kind of self-discovery so that I could be better at these things. I kept running into that issue in schools, that just because someone is a certain age doesn't necessarily mean that they're self-aware, doesn't mean that they have self-management skills.
What do you mean? You mean just because I'm over 20 or 30 now, I don't have all those skills already? Like,
you know what, Scott? You may not.
and that's the thing, right? Like, if we're looking around the room, it's like we didn't have the opportunity to learn these things as kids growing up.
No.
And therefore, it doesn't mean that we have them all of a sudden now because we're called adults.
Exactly.
And so I'm curious, how does that play with the social emotional learning? And let's say talking to the adults and the leaders that are listening in, how does somebody cultivate that if they recognize maybe they didn't get that experience?
Well, I truly believe, and the work that I do through 3D Life Inc. is, I truly believe that it starts with us. It starts with acknowledging that there are things that I can learn. Just because I'm, 48 years old does not mean that I have it all together. But it also doesn't mean that I can't learn, that I can't learn it.
Exactly.
I can be explicitly taught. I can have role models. I can have the opportunities to practice if I look for them and or if I create them. And so I think a lot of what comes up when we talk about social emotional learning and emotional intelligence skills is that there's an expectation on adults that you should already have this. That now that you have the words, now that you have the terms, you should be just self-aware.
Yeah.
You should know what emotions you're having, how to articulate them properly, how to manage them in an appropriate way, and be able to problem solve everything and figure everything out and make great decisions.
And I think it's so funny from a people and culture perspective, and a leadership perspective. It's quite an oxymoron, I guess we would say, because we have this expectation that we should know and how to be able to act upon these words, or the buzzwords per se, but it doesn't often appear in our job description. It doesn't often appear in a skills matrix within an organization. It doesn't often appear in conversations unless we're in trouble or on a performance review or improvement program, right? And so I think that we're getting better as humans in understanding and unlocking that self-awareness piece. But I think we have a long way to go in the sense of normalizing it and systematizing things so that we're leading in from data or evidence-based perspectives. Because what I think there's a huge opportunity for is to understand ourselves as a human, not from a place of, I'm going to peg you in a category and you stay there, but from a place of like that GG, we call it the greater good, in the sense of, okay, here's my baseline, and I have an opportunity with regards to self-management and some of these subcategories to learn about, or I have an opportunity with regards to conflict management or delegation, and how does that back into me as a human? And being able to be in those safe environments to practice it. And that's, I think, the hardest thing, because we see leaders oftentimes where they know that there's areas for growth and there's automatic judgment, even though that leader is self-aware and they're trying to work on things. So I really find and have fallen in almost somewhat of an infatuation with this thing called emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, because A, it's such a big playing space, and B, there's so much of the action piece that we ought to be learning, not just the buzzwords.
Exactly. And, I've heard it said, and I've read it, and I've seen it in articles and whatnot, but people kind of buck up against emotional intelligence skills and social emotional learning skills because they're considered quote unquote soft skills. They don't have a place in business, or they don't have a place in leadership. The problem with that is that if they're soft skills, it sounds like they're easy to do. The problem is that the biggest thing is that they're the hardest. They're the hardest. So they're the most uncomfortable ones. It's much easier to stick to this is what we've always done, and this is what leadership is, and stay stuck in that traditional framework, because to extend yourself beyond that requires being comfortable with discomfort.
Exactly. And I mean, when it comes to emotional intelligence, it's been around archaically, but not paid attention to, or not given the space that it ought to. Like, so for example, if, our buddy Plato has said, all learning has an emotional base, or, moving forward with regards to Aristotle, he further added down the road that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. When we look at our military perspective, especially the US, they've tapped into human skills and emotional learning and emotional intelligence from a purely, a survival perspective. But as a result of that, they have strong leadership skills, strong team gelling skills, and heightened awareness with regards to not just their core competencies on how to use artillery, etc., but how to use themselves as a tool based on the job that they've been instructed to do. So I find it from a corporate perspective quite interesting that it's only something talked about after the fact. They didn't do a good job because they weren't great with people, or we really, really enjoy Ange. She's solid at knocking out sales numbers, but she's not a great team player, right? So I just find the whole thing quite interesting. And we have our advocates out there, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek, Cy Whitman, and more, our Daniel Goleman's, etc. But it's like, how do we get it into a perspective where we can lean into curiosity from a workplace setting, so that it's not standoffish or it's not an afterthought?
Yeah, I think that comes, I truly believe that comes from number one, having a really clear vision of what it is that your company or business or school, wherever you're leading from or leading within, it's what is the vision you have? What's your big picture? Like, what do you really want to be happening and being accomplished within this space? And then looking at what values are embodied within that, your own personal and those of your team, those of the people who work with you. Because in order to intentionally lead, I think you need to have that kind of visionary awareness, I guess is the word, of yourself and others, but also that you're as you're moving toward the same goals and you're wanting the same intentions, then that's going to require great communication. That's going to require fantastic feedback, like high quality feedback, not just, hey, great job, I look forward to coming in and seeing you next month. Like that's we have to start looking at what is the environment around, like, that we're leading, and is it conducive for people to feel that they can trust each other and you? Can they speak up when they need to, or offer an idea? Do you allow, as the leader, people to disagree with you? That there's power in debate. There's a difference between unproductive conflict and productive conflict.
Right.
and embracing that, as opposed to saying, oh, we don't want conflict here. Don't rub her the wrong way, or don't create any friction because it won't be good for a week.
Right.
That's all emotional intelligence. That's all, like, all of the skills that we talk about in SEL and EIQ is those softer, quote unquote, human skills that are necessary to have the relationships required to be as successful as you possibly can.
100%.
And to serve the people that you're serving successfully and well.
Exactly. And I think we've seen this common thread. I mean, how many? We're over 80 podcasts now, Ange.
Yeah.
Which that in itself is which is mind-boggling. We'll transition out of that. 18 months, but we've seen it with the leaders that come on, all the things that you're mentioning, Michelle, when they talk about teams that gel, or they talk about team chemistry and how people work together, it comes down to the trust, comes down to communication, comes down to that psychological safe environment that I can speak up without feeling like I'm going to be beaten down again or get in trouble because I offered my opinion.
Right.
And so I'm curious, when looking at some of these social emotional learning skills, what's the impact on well-being at work and just in life and overall?
It's interesting that you bring this up, because one of the buzzwords of, particularly, I think, over the course of the pandemic, that has really started to kind of grate on me is self-care. Practice self-care, do self-care, make sure you're taking care of yourself. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that eating well and exercising or getting some movement in or getting enough sleep or connecting with loved ones, and I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that those things are not important. However, if I work in a place that I don't feel that I have a voice, or that I'm not valued, or that I don't know how I contribute to the vision or to what we're working toward.
Right.
If I can't have a conversation with the person who's supervising me or leading me as an employee, then that impacts my well-being. And so I can do all of the self-care things I want outside of work, but when I come to work, I'm not going to be as well as I could be if I had that workplace culture that supported me and lifted me and the team. Having people that work well together and really have similar intentions and goals in mind, because the leader has done a really great job at inspiring that vision and communicating what it is that we all do and how we all make it happen. That enhances my well-being just as much as taking care of myself.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what I'm hearing, Michelle, is that the wellness perspective of eating well, being well, exercising well, those are all aftercare factors, right, or managing pieces.
Right.
It's not so much the key or resolve to a lot of the inward and outward problems that we have that circle around EIQ or SEL. I hear you in that, in the sense that if we don't have our roots within our organization or, solid ground and understand exactly what we're doing, then that all in itself is turmoil. Over the past year, Scott and I have collectively accumulated over 300 hours of coaching, and the common thread amongst all of our clients, anywhere from business owners to frontline developers, because they all deserve a safe space to be coached, of course. But that aside, the common thread is what's my purpose? Am I valued? How do I show up? How do I mitigate conflict? How do I converse? All of these questions are being asked throughout, all organizations and all levels of organizations. And so if we're having these sidebar conversations or we're having coaching opportunities on this, how do we assimilate it so that it's received? Again, it goes back to that same question around how do we set it up for success within organizations? And I think it comes down to oftentimes things around motivation, perspectives, and drive, right, of our key stakeholders. And, you know, Scott and I can see it for our clients in that some clients will come to us and they'll be like, hey, we've heard about this stuff. Help us out more. And we're like, yes, okay, we're on board, 100%. And then there's other clients where it's like, you know what, I'm coming from a place of vulnerability and this sounds awkward, but I don't know what I don't know, but I want my organization to be okay. And I think that is the right, I guess, first step in that direction of trying to set those environments up for success.
Absolutely. I also, if you're, and on that note, if you are thinking about, if an organization is thinking about the people who work within that organization as numbers, they have their job, they know what they're supposed to do, here, do it. If that's the only way that they're viewing the people, the human beings in their organization, then more than likely, and I'm sure that there's research out there to support this, there's going to be more turnover and there's going to be more disgruntlement and there are going to be more grievances. There are going to be more issues and more than likely not as much success in the outcomes or the goals that your company or organization is trying to achieve.
Exactly.
The human being has to be considered in as in like with the employee, and it all comes down to those relationships. And so I commend the people, your clients who are coming to you and saying, I don't know what I don't know. I'd really like, I'd like you to help me with this, or I'd like to get better at this, because that tells me that's a very clear way of saying, I want this company or this organization to be the best that it can be for everybody. And that's huge.
It really is.
Yeah,
it's huge.
It is. Ange and I are like jumping up and down inside. I think when you were talking there, we even kind of like looked at each other.
Because those are the people you know you can work with too, right? When there is that willingness or that openness, I guess, to be vulnerable enough to say, can you help out with this? You, like I said, you know that you have someone that you can help shape and mold their vision with them, so that it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
It's like a win-win-win. You know,
couldn't agree more.
Leadership wins, the organization wins, the employees win. It's another win too, because then the customers, the clients that they're serving, they win as well. So that's huge when someone's able to say, all right, help me out here.
We really appreciate you, Michelle, and thank you for coming on and just sharing your experience in the emotional intelligence and social emotional learning space and how you work with both children and adults and the impact that you've seen. Really excited to have you here. And as we're coming to a close, we always like to ask our guests, what are a few words of inspiration that you would want the world to hear?
I guess the first thing I would say is that it's never too late to start. There's not an age limit on learning these skills or trying to be a bit better for your own self, because these skills help you with your own well-being just as much as they help with others' well-being as well. So yeah, I think it's never too late. If you're listening to this and you think, oh gosh, that sounds like a lot of work. It's like James Clear in Atomic Habits says, start small, small, small. What's one thing you could start today? One thing that you could do today that would start to make the shift.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Again, echoing Scott's thoughts, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and our subscribers today on the Elevate Business podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. I can't believe how quickly time goes when when you're excited to talk about these things. Time flies.
It certainly does. Yeah. Likewise, we feel the same way, Michelle. And for our Intuitive Performance and Elevate Business podcast subscribers, we're going to put Michelle's link to 3D Life Inc. on our podcast title page. Everyone, take good care. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.